Hi, I'm Joe Markley, here to talk to you today about politics, but a little different kind of politics. On Tuesday evening, we will have an election here in Connecticut for state Republican chairman. And I have a role to play in that because I'm now a member of the Republican State Central Committee. So I want to talk a little bit first about the Republican State Central Committee and what that's all about, and second about this race for chairman and how I intend to vote in it. The Republican Party is governed by a group of 74 people, almost all of whom are chosen, two per state Senate district, by members of the local Republican town committees. There's 36 state Senate districts. Two people per district gives us 72, plus the chairs of the Young Republicans and the College Republicans are voting members of the State Central Committee. And the State Central Committee effectively is a board of directors for the Republican Party. It meets roughly once a month. It approves budgets and takes initiatives and oversees the work of the chairman and the staff. But the most important function they serve is in picking a new state Republican chairman every 2 years. And I was elected to the State Central Committee last month, and I will vote on Tuesday night for the new chairman. We have 4 candidates before us for chairman, and I think 2 of them I can deal with briefly because I don't think they have enough support to win the election. One is Matt O'Brien, who's a young town committee chair from Coventry, and another is an old friend of mine, a former legislator and a former state chairman back in the late 80s and the early 90s, Dick Foley. I have a great deal of respect for Dick's political experience and his political insight, and he's a man I've considered a friend for a long time. But I don't think either Dick or Matt has the votes to win the election on Tuesday night. I think the only 2 people that are really in the race are the incumbent chairman, J.R. Romano, who's been in for 4 years, and David Mathis, who's a lawyer currently living down in Darien, who's lived in Connecticut all his life, has been active in politics mostly on the fundraising side. Mathis contacted me probably bordering on 2 months ago, at a time when I didn't actually expect to be in this position, to talk to me about his candidacy. And I have to say I was extremely impressed with the man. Very intelligent, very accomplished, very successful man, and a man who, when you meet him, you feel can walk into any sort of room and command the respect of the people in that room. And his pitch, to a large extent, was about his fundraising capability, that we haven't been raising enough, that we could increase this dramatically under his leadership, and also that we need to go in a new direction. And I have to say, given the very disappointing and severe loss that we suffered in the last election, not simply at the gubernatorial election, which was relatively close, but in the state legislature where we lost a painful number of seats that we should not have lost, I think there's a presumption that a change in leadership would be healthy. And I was inclined that way. But in getting behind Dave Mathis, it requires getting behind somebody who really doesn't have any relevant political experience for the job. He's never been an office holder or a candidate. He's never been a campaign manager. He really does not have that political background. And recent experience, especially with candidates, has made me wary. We have a lot of people that are successful in different roles of life, but they don't necessarily get politics or have the particular skill set, the peculiar skill set, one might even say, that politics demands. And I have to say that in the subsequent weeks of observing David Mathis, I have not been reassured, either by the interactions I've seen between him and members of the committee, or in the fleshing out of his plans for the State Central Committee. His ability to deal with a lot of different people, some of whom are more useful and more helpful and easier to deal with than others, is a big part of the job. There's no getting around it. It's a 74-member board, and they all feel important and to some extent need to be treated as if they're important. And I'm not sure that David has the skill set for that. And I haven't been impressed necessarily with the plans he's put forward, a lot of which go without saying. We want to strengthen town committees. We want to raise more money. We want to attract better candidates. Everybody wants to do that. The question isn't how you do that. The question isn't whether you do that. The question is how do you do that? And I don't believe that David has made any progress in explaining that. And recently, as a fairly small group of people who are his kitchen cabinet, and in recent days, I feel like a couple of them have stepped over the line in attacking their fellow Republicans in an attempt to influence the vote that takes place on Tuesday night. I don't think that they've done David any good at all in getting him support, and I don't think they have put him in a position which would make it easy for him to bring the party together if he were elected chairman. They went after, in particular, Mary Ann Turner, I'll mention, a fine town chairwoman up in Enfield, Connecticut, somebody who I don't simply consider a friend, I consider a kind of a model for what a town chair can do. And I feel like if people want to focus on anyone who thinks that Mary Ann Turner is the problem in the state party, in my opinion, doesn't really understand what we need as Republicans here in Connecticut. She's organizes, she finds the candidates, she pushes them and kicks them and pulls them and does whatever she needs to do to get them elected. And I wish we had more of her, and by no means do I want to see her marginalized. I think she should be embraced and others like her. So after much thought on this subject and sincere thought and conversations with the people involved, but especially these two candidates, I'm going to cast my vote on Tuesday night for the incumbent J.R. Romano. I know that'll disappoint people who feel like we need to go in a different direction, but I think we as Republicans, above all, ought to be careful about taking the Democratic position, which I often complained about in the legislature. We've got to do something. It's not just a matter of doing something, it's doing the right thing, or doing something that we have reason to believe will improve the situation. And although I could give you a critique of things that I wish JR had done differently or initiatives that I wish he would embrace, I still feel like he's a man that I know what he can do. And I would rather have that at this point than an unknown, and especially an unknown that I have reason to be skeptical about. At some point shortly, I'll come back to you with an update on goings-on in the state legislature. You're aware of it. It's obviously over for the session. It will be back for a special session. They may or may not be back to talk about tolls. I've talked to you before about tolls. I've encouraged you to contact people about tolls, and I think that what we have done so far has worked. And if they couldn't get it through in the regular session, I don't see any reason why their odds will be better in a special session. Sometimes that time restriction, that ticking clock of the session, makes things happen. It didn't happen, and now there is no particular time restriction, and I think they may just negotiate and never get a deal together before they go back next year. That would be good news for the state of Connecticut, and I think it would be good news it's good news for all of us who have been trying to stop tolls, because it shows that we can win these battles, as many discouragements as we've had. Anyways, this is Joe Markley, State Central representative for the 16th District, Southington, Waterbury, Wolcott, Prospect, and Cheshire. If you have any comments, you can respond to me at this email, and I will plan to be back to you within a few weeks to talk a little bit more about what happened in the legislature this year. Thanks for your attention.